let's begin. Okay. The movie we are going to see in a few minutes is called Edda Ciano, il comunista. Edda Ciano was a dictator, Italian dictator Mussolini's daughter. And the communist man, he was a partisan. So we are going to tell the story, a love story, between two very different persons. To develop this story, I have been using some kind of forms, not rules, but the way I try to give shape and form to my inspiration. So I try to convey this story, since you are going to see it, so it's unuseful to tell so much about it, in a more general form. That is the way I work. So, first we have inspiration, of course. Some of you, as a directors, will be inspired by your own poetic world. Some other are inspired by other movies, like Mr. Tarantino. But my inspiration usually comes from reality. I use reality as a form of inspiration of my work. I've been doing that also as a screenplay writer. I've been making a screenplay writer for more or less 20 years. And I found it close to my soul as an author. In a way, when I was a screenplay writer, reality was like a common ground between me and the director. This way, I did not have to depend on someone else's poetic world. So, reality, in the tradition of Italian neorealismo, is what we use to make movies. So, it can be an event, it can be an historical figure, it can be a social issue on which we want to explore contradictions and possibilities, but we use the reality. Then my work is to give shape to the story. So to create from reality my own way of storytelling, my own way to have a filmmaking process of creativity. It's like a grid I use to see if what I'm making does make sense in terms of cinematography storytelling or not. And I found it useful, so I just want to exchange my experience with you. Maybe you can find it useful as well. What I begin first is this. I use this kind of triangle, this eyes of God, just to give form of all the events I'm going to try to tell. Of course, the very first thing I decide is the point a quo and the ad quem term. Where do I begin and where do I end my story? It seems very banal, but it's not. Especially if I'm trying to make a biography, it is very important to decide when I begin telling the story of my main character and when I'm going to end it. For example, if I'm going to tell Napoleon, I cannot think I'm going to tell his death. So I must choose a period which I think makes sense. So the very first thing I decide is the beginning and the end of my story. Paul Schrader, maybe you know him, he's a famous screenplay writer. He wrote Taxi Driver, and then he became a director himself. Told that for him, making a story for cinema was like telling a story close to a bonfire, near the seaside. You are among friends and you tell them you want to tell a story. So the special thing when you want to tell a story to somebody is the beginning and the end, especially the end, because you get out of the cinema with the ending with you. So if you mistake the end of your story, you are making a fundamental mistake. You can do errors in the beginning or in the middle section of your story, but not the end. The end is the most important part of the process of creation of a story for cinema. But in order to find out all the elements, I use this kind of shape. Kubrick said when he was building a story of his films that he was choosing 9 elements of the story, 9 parts of the movie to make to be memorable. So it can be a good exercise when you are thinking to a story, when you are thinking to writing the story for cinema, if you think which are these 9 most important, not scenes, bigger than scenes. I can say moments, but they are not moments. They are many important parts of the story. If you think you have 9 of them, he says, you can begin developing your story. What I usually do is to make a 3-act structure, of course, like this. Why 3-act? You are confronting with the 3-act structure in your studying. We don't know the reason, the real reason. We found out that a 3-moment structure is in nature, is in many other art forms. In music, you have the 3-moment structure, for example, in the sonata or in the concerto, you have allegro, adagio, allegro. In theater, you have a 3-act structure. In philosophy, you have a thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So 3-act seems to be the best way to build a story. That's what I do. I try thinking to my story in the 3-act form. So, in the very beginning, I try to put these 9 or 10 or 12 elements, like Kubrick said, in the 3-act section. So, I already said the importance of the beginning and the end. So, I decide where to start and where to end. Now, we go further. So, we decide which are the main elements of my story, and I put it in the 3 acts. So I can think 3 or 4 many important scenes for the beginning, the same I do for the second act, and the same I do for the end. What makes these elements important? The important is the theme, the character, and the plot. So we get back to this structure to find out which is the theme of my story, which is the character of my story, and which is the plot of my story. Did someone else make this triangle for you, or it is the first time you are looking at something like that, more or less? You did it. And theme, character, and plot. What do I intend for theme? Theme is not the topic of my story. The topic is the general genre, narrative genre, which I'm trying to develop or to explore. What do I call for theme is something different. Is the thematic sentence, the thematic affirmation, the thematic statement I want to make with my story. One of the most traditional examples I can make is Romeo and Juliet. Of course, the topic is love and social division. Okay? This is not the theme of Romeo and Juliet. This is just the topic, love and social division. In my story, what happens to these elements? Who is going to win? Is going to win love or the social division? If I think that love is going to win, I'm making a positive statement. I say, even if there are social divisions, love is going to win. So in this case, the thematic affirmation is positive. So in Aristotelic terms, we have the comedy. If I think that in a world of social division, love is not going to win, I'm making a negative statement, so my story is a tragedy. So in a very simple way, we have comedy when we go from bad to good in narrative terms, and we have tragedy when we go from good to bad. So, of course, Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy. It's evident. Everybody knows that this is part of Shakespeare's tragedies. But sometimes it's not so easy to find out, because we are talking about the narrative form of the structure, not the effect on the audience. I may think I'm looking to a comedy, but in narrative terms, we are going to a pessimistic statement, so it is a tragedy. Or otherwise, my film can be very funny, very laughable, but in narrative terms, it is a tragedy because I'm making a negative statement from the good one to the bad one. So it is very important for us to find out if your story is a comedy or a tragedy. Which are the elements I must explore to decide if I'm making a negative or a positive story? It is the fact that the thematic statement must be my statement. This is what I think and what I feel confronting with my story. So you must find yourself in the process. You must be honest, and you must make an honest statement of what you feel for a social problem, or what you feel in human relationship, or what you feel trying to make emotions and trying to tell a story that can be seen, appreciated, and can move emotions in your audience. The thematic statement is fundamental because we are talking about the character. So the character, the protagonist of my story, is the one who lives all the problems of the thematic statement. What is the plot? The plot is the series of events that happen to the character thinking of the thematic statement. So in a way, when I'm building my story, all the three elements of the story, they are combined together in order to make me make not random choices. So I can decide that a scene is an important scene if it can make the plot go further. Is about the character and is thematic. Talks about the thematic problems of my story. In this way, I can avoid casual choices. I can have something like a grid that helps me building all the story I'm making. So, talking of the film you are going to see, the problem was I read in a newspaper the review of a book. The book was telling the story of this daughter of Italian Mussolini, of the dictator, that was sent to exile in a very, very small island in Sicily. In this small island, she was supposed to die of starvation, of isolation, of loneliness, of the effect of the tragedy that happened to her, because this Mussolini's daughter used to be very powerful, very rich, very famous. She had married the foreign minister of his father's government. It was a dictatorship, but there was the cabinet of ministers, and Count Ciano was the foreign minister of this cabinet. So the daughter of the dictator had married the foreign minister. Then this foreign minister, so he was Mussolini's son-in-law, voted against him to let the fascismo crumble. After that, Mussolini has had sentenced to death Ciano. After that, Italian people sentenced to death Mussolini. So after this kind of Shakespeare tragedy, she was alone. She was sent in Sicily. In Sicily, she met this partisan. He was communist, so he was the enemy. They were two people whose destiny was to hate each other. Otherwise, they fall in love one to the other. So, which story I'm telling? Which is the main character? Which is the protagonist, the real protagonist of this story? Which are the 9 elements of the plot? And which is the theme? Which is the real theme of my story? The love story is a topic, is a general. It's not a statement. It's just the part of the plot. But I want to make a moral statement with my story. So I want to find out which the theme is of my story. That's why I go further in the 3-act structure, using a narrative design made by an American author who is Dara Marx. Do you know her? No? Okay. That is done this way. This is the movie. This is in the first act, the second, and the third. In the beginning of the story, we have all that is behind the story, the backstory of the main character, what happened in the past. And in the very beginning, let's say in this part, 10 minutes maybe, we have the setup. The setup is the description of the world in the very beginning of the story. In the setup, I have the definition of who the character is and which is his her main problem. We called his fatal wound, the fatal flaw. The hero is not a superhero. It is a hero with a problem. We usually talk about the journey of the hero, hero is in narrative terms, coming from from Christopher Vogler. Maybe you know his books about narrative. You know, Chris Vogler. You read, or Joseph Campbell. We always talk about the journey of the hero. Which is the journey of the hero? It is a journey of growth. If we are telling a comedy, because we are making a positive statement. We are telling a story of inner growth. But otherwise, if you are making a tragedy, this kind of structure will be negative. And so it's not an inner growth, but is a journey to isolation, to letting the dark side enter and make this fatal flaw terrible, close to death, or to the most dramatic consequences. In the very beginning, we have this moment. This is what we called in Italian incidente scatenante. The incidente scatenante can be translated. I hope your English is better as mine, so we can understand each other. The incidente scatenante is the triggering incident. Let's say kicking the ass of the protagonist. The protagonist, the main character, is living in the setup in a world where he has many narrative problems. We are talking of a hero who has, we call them headaches. It's not perfect. He has problems. So, what is the triggering incident? The narrative earthquake in the world of the beginning of the story. The triggering incident usually happens, let's say, at 10, 15 minutes from the beginning. Then you have the period of resistance, in which the hero did get this shock, but is trying to resist to the narrative shock of the incident. And then we have the first turning point. And this is the second turning point. The turning point is a main change in direction. So, usually, let's say this is a comedy. Let's say this is a positive journey for our hero. So the first turning point usually is he begins his adventure. Usually we call the accident the call for adventure. The hero resists, but in the first turning point he decided to, okay, let's take the adventure and go in the other world. There is another world. It is the world of the story. It is the world where the journey of the hero goes to his main consequences. This is the midpoint. The midpoint is the point in which the story is divided. When in cinemas we used to have the first primo tempo, secondo tempo, in Italy was that way, it was the division. The division, so, is the very moment we call enlightenment. Enlightenment is like a trailer, is a foreshadowing of a final scene if it could be positive. So it is a positive moment for the hero in which things seems to be going very well. But it's not true. The forces of evil now they come together in order to fight the hero. The concept I try to explain is the concept of team and contro team. control team is the other statement. Negative if the team is positive, positive if the team is negative. So we say that these are the forces who try to fight the hero. So the forces against him, outside him, they are trying to block him, reach his goal. The goal of the hero is, of course, what he is trying to get. We have two goals, the inner goal and the external goal. The inner goal, the goals of the character are one external goal that refers to the plot. This is what he wants. There is another goal, the inner goal, that refers to the theme, that is what he needs. Maybe even if he is not aware of that. But this is something he needs for inner growth of his soul. So, when we make this movement, in real terms, we are making three of these. Because we have the plot line, the character line, and the thematic line. So the main events of the story should be referring to all the three parts of it. So the first turning point is the first turning point for the plot, for the theme, and for the character. And even so, the second turning point. The first turning point is positive. The story is growing, and he has received the good forces of the triggering incident, and so he is growing. The second turning point is negative, because he is going to get drowned by the forces he is fighting, in external world, but also inside him. So the second turning point, negative, leads to the very bottom line. There is a symmetry between the upper level and the darkest end level that is called ashes of the hero, that is called the catabasis, so the descent to the inferno. And I think maybe Chris Fogler talks about the inmost cave, the moment of death of the hero. It is not, of course, he's the hero. He's going to go to the end of the movie. But it is a death experience. Maybe it can be the death of his illusions. Maybe it can be the death of his relationship, if you are telling a love story, for example. Maybe it is the death of his professional hopes. We don't know. But in this bottom section of the story, it is the most dramatic. For example, if you are making a comedy, this is the very serious moment in which things seems not to be funny at all. It is maybe something that gives gravity to a light story. If it is a tragedy, this is the lightest moment before the ordeals, before the very, very moment of the third act. The third act in a comedy is that our hero comes out of the cave with the elixir, the magical weapon, the new knowledge. So he now is a better man, a better woman, so he can fight the end. In a tragedy, he comes back from this very light moment to the darkest spirits, ghosts of his soul, and is going to the darkest ending. In my story, we had a love story. You are going to see a love story between the two people, Edda Ciano and the communist man. So I told myself, what story I'm telling, what real story I'm telling, which is the thematic statement, which is the main character. I found out that this story was somehow a split protagonist. Both of them are protagonists. But I decided to tell the story from the point of view of the partisan. Because I thought in his story, the arrival of Edda is a very triggering incident. And this is the film you are going to see. So, he is a partisan, he made the war, he was a soldier earlier, he is coming back to his island, and he is a survivor. There was a war, many people died, but he is still alive. So he asked himself, why I'm still alive? Why do I deserve to be alive? What can be better in this world of death, devastation, war, and so on? And this is all the questions he asked himself, coming back to his island. In this island arrives Edda Ciano. Edda Ciano is the triggering incident in the life of Leonida, So the protagonist is not Edda Ciano, even if the movie is called Edda Ciano COMUNISTA, the real protagonist is the communist man. Because in his life, Edda is the fundamental triggering incident that makes him understand that in a world of social division, you cannot be different if you are not better. You cannot be better if you are not different. So the important decision he makes, that is the decision to help the dictator daughter, is a revolutionary decision that puts him against all his people. That's why we are making the first turning point, that is the love story. The moment of enlightenment is the moment of happiness in the story. Then we arrive to the second turning point, that is a dramatic one, because it is the moment in which they are divided. One from one side and one from the other side, because it was the moment in which in Italy there was the referendum to decide if it was going to be a republic or a monarchy. And so they are divided. So we have that two acts are in the island, and then the third act is out of the island. The moment in which they decide to leave each other, and the end, which I'm not going to tell, otherwise I'm going to spoil it, and I want you to see the movie and you to decide what I decided. I'm not telling you if my story is a comedy or a tragedy. I'm telling a love story. So only in the end you find out if you saw a comedy or a tragedy. You find out if we have a thematic positive statement or a negative one. But this structure, this grid, helps me to find out what's important and what's not. So this is what helps me when I'm confronting to reality in deciding which are the very basic important elements of my story. And I hope you will enjoy the movie, and okay, we can go and see it. Okay, thank you.
I was going to suggest that you write the theme, the thematic affirmation in the paper, so that in the end we can talk a little bit about it, then see if it matches. But
that can be a good exercise.
Yeah, it can be sort of a secret. We ask Pedro to put the board back there, and you write what you.
I write, and then at the end.
We only reveal in the.
Yes,
in the end.
You can choose your own thematic statement, because there aren't so many thematic statements. They are part of our cultural life. There are few of them. we can apply to our story, because they are something like the moral basement of our culture, of our civilization. So let's say a thematic statement can be solo chi cade può risorgere. Only if you fall down you can rejoice. Or maybe, for example, another thematic statement frequently used in cinema is united we stand, divided we fall. Kind of an example in which you can positively make this exercise. You try to find out what's your thematic statement you find in a film, especially in a strange one, let's say Tarantino's movie. Which is the thematic statement you're going to make? He seems to make a very revolutionary film from the plot point of view. But, for example, we made a very funny exercise using Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction is, a very curious structure, like a circle, like an Escher picture. One story enters to the other in a circle, in narrative circles. But we kind of destroyed the circle. We find out all the stories, we put them together, and we found out the thematic statement of the story, which was the Bible reference of my Samuel Jackson. You remember what he says in a certain important point of the movie? The life of the right man is continuously
continuously challenged.
This is the thematic statement of the movie, and it is a false Bible reference. In the Bible, there's not that sentence. Tarantino is such a genius, so he found out a false Bible just to put, with a lot of irony, the thematic statement in the mouth of Samuel Jackson before shooting and before making a massacre. So, but that was, if you then try to follow all the plot movements in every single story of Pulp Fiction, you discover that he was very close to the statement. He was very classical. He's not revolutionary at all. He who is honest with himself in the ethic kind of view will survive. He is gonna be not honest, he is going to fall and be killed. So in a way, it's a very traditional movie, even if it is redone, rebuilt in a very innovative way as it did. So I can think it is a good exercise even with friends, because sometimes it's not so clear which is the statement. So maybe a statement is your statement, but you can be surprised that your fiancé, that your friend find out another statement, maybe the contrary. But it is important for you as an author to find out your statement when you are building the story. You cannot begin with a statement. It is not inspiration. Inspiration comes from somewhere else. Inspiration comes from your life, something that moves your fantasy. But during the process, during the way, you must find out what your story is really about, what lies beneath, what there is in the underground of your story. And sometimes it's a real exploitation. It's like going down a deep cave of your soul where you find out something unexpected. So it is a journey for the film, but also for yourself. But I remember you, find yourself in the process. Be honest with the thematic statement you make. You cannot be cynical. You cannot make a statement only in order to sell your story to some producer, Harvey Weinstein or whatever. you must be very honest because the statement comes from your soul, from your inner moral principles. And that's all. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Graziano.
Thank
It was
you.
a
Grazie.
pleasure to have you here. Well, let's watch the film and we'll bring this in the back and you can maybe write down your, so that we can compare afterwards.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
We're gonna watch the film now.
Trovare dove scrivere.
Eh?
Where to write?